Let's continue on Chapter 5. What I'm going to talk about today is some of the different constraints that we have. So last lesson I left off on some of the geometric constraints. Specifically, I think I left off on having a perpendicular or a horizontal or vertical geometric constraint. Now let's talk about the point on curve constraint. So I'm going to go ahead and I have my NX file already open. I'm going to go ahead and start a new sketch. Click OK. And I start drawing a profile. So in the text we have some profile that they give us that is a little bit odd shaped. I'm just going to go ahead and just sketch it here very quickly. See if I could do something, and I'll mess it up a little bit so we can practice some of our other constraints. So one of the things is you guys notice that I have this, one of the arms of this is a little bit crooked. So to practice some of our constraints, let me go ahead and pan the screen so this is centered. And let's go ahead and select one of our constraints. If you remember on one of the last lessons, we did a perpendicular constraint, and we can do that again here. So let's go ahead and select this line. Let's go ahead and select this line, and we can say that we want these two lines to be perpendicular to one another, and it'll fix itself. So we don't have to worry too much about having crooked lines. And there's some other constraints that you can play with. You can put these as parallel or parallel. You can make them vertical. There's several different things that you can play with. But for now, let's do one called the point on curve constraint. So what I'm going to do is I want this point to be the same height as this line. So when I select this point and I select this line is going to decrease in length up to the point where they're both even. So let's go ahead and try that. So I'm going to go ahead and select my constraint, and I'm going to go ahead and pick this point, the end point of this line. I'm going to go ahead and pick the top of this line. And what you see is a couple constraints. You can play with both, but let's just do point on curve. So when I select point on curve, it aligns both of the two, it aligns the point of this object to be aligned with the top of that curve. And that is basically the point on curve command. So you can play with those different constraints, see what it does for you, see which ones you like to use, and we'll move on now. Let me go ahead and delete this. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and let me refresh the screen so the little dots are gone. Let me go ahead now and show you the next one, the collinear line constraint. So let's say we have an object, and again, I'll select and start a new sketch. And the text gives us something that is a little bit odd shaped again. So let's go ahead and draw this shape. And I think in one of your class exercises you have something somewhat similar to this. And you can practice your constraints on that object as well. So let's go ahead and I'm just sketching this out, and it's looking a little bit odd, but let's go ahead and continue. So a few things. Oh, I made that crooked, so let's go ahead and do our perpendicular constraint again to straighten it out. And the one we can practice some others. Let's say we want to select these two, and let's say we want to have these two. Let's say we want to have an equal length lines. Oops. I can select these three lines and select that I want them to be all equal lengths. So it adjusts itself to be a little bit more symmetric. The one I really want to show you though is the collinear line constraint in this case. So I can select the tops of these, and let's say I want to select all four of them, and you'll see one that says collinear. And what it's going to do is it's going to line these all up very nicely so that it's it's all on the same line. So you see, and let me go ahead and pen there so you can see it. So now you see I selected the collinear line constraint and has drawn a line that is straight across all four of these in a very nice, even fashion. You can set other constraints on here. We can set all these to be equal distances. We can also set these to be equal lengths from this bottom of this shape. And I'll let you try to practice those and play with those different constraints. And for time's sake, let me go ahead and move on to our next drawing or our next tutorial. Or let me go ahead and just start to sketch here. So the next sketch is going to be the tangent constraint. And let's say I want to draw a few lines here. Here's a line. Let me go ahead and make an arc now. I don't know, something like this in the text is given. I'm just following along, just making something up basically, just to illustrate this constraint option. Okay. So basically what this constraint is going to allow us to do is going to allow us to make sure that this line is tangent to this particular arc. And what I'm going to want to do for this is I'll select both of these lines, and you'll see that the tangent icon now comes up. And when I click it, you'll see now that the arc has been made completely smooth with the particular arc that I've drawn. Again, that has happened here, and I don't know what will happen on this one. It looks a little strange, but there it goes. So you can see this particular option, and you see we may be able to use some of our other ones that we've learned. Let's try point on curve. And so you guys can see how we can adjust this. And then again, if you want to fix it into one location, we can select the constraint to fix a certain point, and again remove some of these other red degrees of freedom indicators that are located on here. So that's it. That's the basic tangent constraint. I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and I'm going to finish off Chapter 5 in our next lesson, and we will then move on to Chapter 6, where we'll get into some of our design features, which I think you'll also find very useful.